Dual radar warning systems wail simultaneously as the clock hits 10:40. Sassy 11 and Sassy 12, a pair of U.S. Air Force B-52H Stratofortresses, knife through the South China Sea at 30,000 feet, maintaining a heading designed to appear utterly ordinary. For 2 hours prior, the night had remained undisturbed. Then, the threat display doesn't merely flicker, it ignites. A single contact materializes 55 nautical miles distant, closing at better than 600 knots, swallowing the distance between Dallas and Fort Worth in 3 minutes. Moments later, the picture sharpens into what any bomber crew recognizes instantly. Fighter radar in acquisition mode. The intercept is live. The aircraft commander's voice cuts through the interphone, directing the crew to maintain heading, maintain course. A bomber task force depends on predictability. The entire operation hinges on appearing precisely as you are. Routine, non-threatening. The kind of flight plan that suggests a professional Air Force has command. That's the principle, anyway. The contact cares nothing for principles. It narrows the gap at speeds that transform friendliness into a vulnerability. 2.5 miles back, the wingman's crew detects the same emitter a moment later. Now, 2 sets of eyes follow one threat through the darkness, watching identical readouts, and neither aircraft so much as shivers. This defines a properly executed task force, right until it stops being one. The radar tone piercing both electronic warfare officers' headsets originates from the AN/ALR-46, the B-52's initial defense, a passive antenna array that listens across 12 to 18 gigahertz and differentiates up to 16 radars simultaneously by pulse rhythm and signature pattern. The instant this one activated, the system had already designated it Type 1493, the radar built into China's J-11 flanker. Visual contact hasn't transpired, yet the bomber already knows exactly which aircraft is climbing to engage. Minutes later, the fighter appears on the nose camera, and what the aircraft commander observes is unmistakable. A J-11 ascending from the bomber's 6 o'clock, twin engines radiating molten white in the infrared, like coals smoldering in a black fireplace. The Shenyang J-11, China's reverse-engineered Su-27 flanker. Twin WS-10A engines generating 58,000 pounds of total thrust. Mach 2.35 maximum altitude. 1,800 nautical mile combat radius. 4 PL-15 beyond visual range missiles mounted on hardpoints, each engineered to destroy bombers operating beyond visual range. 46 tons of fighter, flown by one of the People's Liberation Army's most experienced pilots. The pair of gimbal-mounted optics mounted beneath the bomber's nose belong to the electro-optical viewing system, a thermal camera and low-light television merged into a single turret. On the moonless night, that thermal image transforms absolute darkness into something approximating daylight, sufficient to extract a fighter from blackness at considerable distance. Think of it as a premium Ring doorbell camera affixed to the nose of a strategic bomber. Except instead of catching porch burglars, it's spotting fighters moving through darkness. Each frame records to storage. The B-52 crew has visual on the flanker long before the flanker has visual on them. The image tells them his closure rate shows no intention of breaking contact. The aircraft commander has half a second to choose. He could bank hard, alter course, expand the separation. No one would contest the decision. At 10 feet and 600 knots of closure, a single control input sends 2 large airframes into the ocean as debris. He maintains course regardless. At the last moment, the J-11 pitches his nose upward and slides beneath Sassy 11's fuselage. So tight, both pilots see the flanker's underside consume their windscreen before it vanishes. Then the turbulence arrives. A mass of violently disturbed air strikes the lead bomber like a hammer. 488,000 pounds of Stratofortress gets hurled through 12 degrees of bank before the commander regains command. Autopilot discharges. The stick shaker pounds beneath his hands. The horizon cartwheels through the instruments. And to be frank, that's the kind of instant that distinguishes the ordinary from the extraordinary. The B-52H Stratofortress carries 8 Pratt & Whitney TF-33 turbofans, weighs 488,000 pounds at maximum gross, and spans 8,800 nautical miles without refueling. Cruise velocity, 523 miles per hour. Transcontinental, from Los Angeles to New York, in 5 hours exactly. First flight happened in 1961. These airframes are expected to continue operations into 2050. The most recent example sitting on the flight line is older than most of the personnel flying her. But right now, number 4 engine ingests the disrupted atmosphere and falters. Fuel-air mixture deteriorates. The computer automatically decreases fuel to avert a flameout, then engages an automatic relight protocol. The pilot recovers 488,000 pounds of aluminum back to level, while the EWO never removes his fingers from the recording device. 6 seconds later, number 4 burns cleanly. Wings level again. Heading shifts not at all. Every electromagnetic signal that fighter just produced, search pulses, IFF transponder response, data link transmission to his ground station, sits already captured in the bomber's storage, time-stamped to the microsecond. The Chinese pilot believes he just transmitted a message. He did. Simply not the one Beijing intended. He just exhausted a full sortie's worth of fuel to hand America intelligence that would demand an enormous expense to gather through alternative means. 2 large aircraft that just passed within 10 feet of collision have one instinctive response: separate, descend, retreat. These 2 do nothing of the sort. The EWO maintains composure. The only relevant question becomes, why? The J-11 climbs back to altitude, levels off, and positions himself into formation scarcely 130 feet off the lead bomber's left side, tight enough to spot individual rivets. He's not complete. He wants visibility. He wants impact. Most importantly, he requires that bomber crew anxious. From his position, the Chinese pilot observes 1 B-52 and 1 exclusively. The glow from 8 turbines, the outline of the lead pilot's skull behind the canopy. What remains invisible, what he isn't even imagining, is a second bomber, 2.5 miles in trail, displaced just sufficiently to remain beyond his attention. He's decided this represents a single aircraft engagement. It's not. At that separation, his radar ceases being a contact and transforms into a deluge. The EWO's spectrum display doesn't flutter, it floods. Radar emissions, IFF transmissions, data link traffic flowing back to his ground station, every transmitter the flanker carries illuminating synchronously. Behind the EWO resides the AN/ALR-20, the bomber's broad-spectrum listening receiver, a panoramic surveillance system that captures every transmission in a 200-mile radius and marks each with location, magnitude, and classification. The ALR-46 alarms when something risky activates. The ALR-20 stands quiet in the background, cataloging everything in view. At 130 feet, The flanker isn't a visitor across the room. He's positioned at the microphone, with his pockets turned inside out. On the separate channel, the Chinese pilot cannot access. The wingman's aircraft commander completes his own quiet evaluation. He gradually increases his throttles a handful of percentage points and permits his bomber to drift forward and inboard, narrowing the gap with the lead measured in feet per second. The adjustment remains imperceptible, far too unhurried for a pilot whose concentration is locked onto the lead cockpit. Throughout the next 90 seconds, the trailing B-52 narrows from trail separation to half a mile, sliding into a place the flanker has no awareness of. He's positioned between two bombers and cognizant of precisely one. Then the wingman's EWO predicts the fighter's forthcoming movement before the fighter executes it. He transmits, "The J-11 will break rightward and relocate." A moment later, it does precisely that. Each bomber's antenna captures the identical pulse, fractionally apart, and that fraction proves sufficient to calculate his location to the meter. Two cellular transmitters, pinpointing a phone neither could find independently. The fused track refreshes twice per second. The rate of bearing change throughout the formation reveals his subsequent turn before he performs it. He cannot move without measurement from two bearings simultaneously, and every time he obscures one side, he exposes another. The flanker resumes the lead's wing and keeps position. Tonight, he's the most exhaustively mapped aircraft in the Western Pacific, and the sole pilot aloft, unaware of it. The undernose turret swivels, aims at the flanker's engine outlet, and as the pilot manipulates his throttles to hold formation speed, military setting, then a burst of afterburner, then back to cruise, the thermal system records the complete heat signature at all power states. That thermal mark corresponds to the WS-10A, China's homegrown replacement for the original Su-27's Soviet power plants. Roughly 29,100 pounds of output per engine, and a turbine's heat signature remains as distinctive as an individual's voice. Its complete thermal behavior at military and full burner settings represents one of the most jealously protected secrets within the People's Liberation Army Air Force, the category of information Beijing would intensely wish the Western Hemisphere never determined. Picture pursuing a particular vocalist's tones for 2 decades, and one evening that singer approaches your speaker and entertains you at intimate proximity for 10 full minutes. All of America's heat-responsive missile suite receives a software revision, and the Chinese pilot simply volunteered as the assessment subject. He's gathering intelligence as well. That forward pod preceding his canopy is an unpowered infrared seeker, observing 8 radiating exhausts directly. What's he learning? In truth, nearly nothing. The B-52 first took to the air when his grandfather occupied elementary school, and Chinese intelligence has taken apart this platform more methodically than any indigenous machine. He's confirming particulars residing in technical specifications since before his birth. The bombers are leaving with priceless material. He's departing with background review. And honestly, that's the subtle comedy of the entire engagement. He expended this jet in the tens of millions and stationed him with one of his finest aviators. And he's consuming both to capture a photograph with a 1950s artifact, while inadvertently leaving his Tesla unattended with windows open. While he shows off from the lead's wing, the wingman has quietly rewritten the whole scenario. He hasn't detected it yet. The J-11 abandons formation, pivots hard right, and vanishes below the bombers into cloud. The wingman's thermal feed registers the heat signature the instant the afterburner ignites. The EWO announces it across their channel. Contact, lead 8 o'clock low, burner lit, repositioning. He's arranging a second engagement, disappearing beneath formation, sweeping outboard to the bomber's 7 o'clock, then rotating his nose up to approach them off the lead's rear quarter. He already executed one difficult pass in 2 minutes of concealment and extracted nothing. Now he wants to puncture the airplane and rupture something critical. He claws out of cloud cover at full military thrust, pitches his nose across the lead's path, and directs superheated engine discharge straight down the inboard intakes. Then he stabilizes just beneath them in a steep right bank, anticipating the response he craves. Number 1 engine compresses. The discharge temperature readout breaks red line. Number 2 compresses a moment later. The commander applies full rudder as 34,000 pounds of output evaporates from the left wing and attempts to rotate the nose away. It resembles a textbook gun pass, excepting he carries no guns. He carries exhaust. Dump sufficient superheated exhaust into a bomber's left intake, and both turbines on that wing fail simultaneously. At this loaded weight, that magnitude of thrust vanishing from one side will flip the airframe inverted unless the crew counteracts it. Here's what transpires inside those turbines. A turbine maintains strict requirements for its intake. It requires smooth, undisturbed, abundant air flowing consistently downward. Supply it something different: perturbation, foreign material, another engine's superheated discharge, and the compressor blades disengage. The mechanism collapses. That's a compressor breakdown, a percussion you experience throughout your torso. Occasionally, flame extends from the intake. Thrust ceases instantaneously. The computer decreases fuel to prevent destruction, then restarts it automatically. Envision a runner at full velocity taking a blow squarely to the chest. He will not complete that stride. He requires seconds to reestablish his breathing before continuing. Introducing heated exhaust into a bomber's intakes represents more than impolite piloting. It constitutes an intentional technique meant to disable 2 turbines at once, comparable to your neighbor operating a leaf blower directly through your residential window. Except your residence travels at 525 miles per hour. Both of Saucy 11's engines restart within 8 seconds. The commander suppresses the drift. The bomber concedes not an inch of height. Up front, the pilots exchange glances, but remain silent. 2 stalls plus a clean reboot represents a demanding 10 seconds in simulation, and substantially more punishing above open sea at darkness. They just managed it without broadcasting on the radio once. Down in the electronic warfare station, the EWO's hand settles onto an activation lever. One switch, and the bomber ceases listening respectfully and commences radiating countermeasures. The flanker just discharged engine spray at minimal distance, deliberately, in a location where a stall might have disabled the turbine irreparably. The EWO possesses complete permission to activate that lever. He registry. That lever engages the AN/ALQ-172, the bomber's active electronic warfare equipment. It's a validated jammer that's preserved B-52s for years, scrambling virtually every radar variety a missile employs to identify you, multiple types simultaneously. Think of it as an intelligent loudspeaker that registers every radar operating and immediately assesses which one represents a hazard, then resolves whether to scramble, spoof, or simply document everything for reference. At 130 feet, documentation represented the prudent option. The instant that jammer radiates, the scenario transitions from silent intelligence gathering to active counter-operations. and the peacetime guidelines governing this sort of encounter are absolute. You do not make the initial electronic assault. So he refrains from acting, and every moment of control discipline represents additional recording time. This isn't desperate jamming and evasive maneuvering. The interception demonstrates authentic proficiency. Tight spacing sustained on a 488,000-pound platform in absolute darkness. Techniques most squadrons cannot accomplish. That's precisely what follows that becomes so illuminating. Technical capability was never this Chinese aviator's constraint this evening. His limitation rests on the fact that intimidation maneuvers function exclusively against a participant prepared to participate. These two American pilots receive his best capabilities as background activity. They're not even entertained. They're simply documenting his control responsiveness and waiting for his exhaustion. He's executed a dangerous pass, a formation shadow, and a face full of engine exhaust, and the only result is two cockpits that won't demonstrate so much as a twitch. Disengaging to initiate a third engagement, the Chinese aviator cannot fathom what simply occurred in Sassy 1-1's compartment. From his vantage, the bomber remains motionless, and the vacancy where countermeasures should exist reads as either American hesitation or American equipment that cannot maintain synchronization. On either account, he's entirely mistaken. Two engagements complete, and he's harvested everything he came pursuing. Rotor turbulence off the lead, engine spray through the intakes, not a movement from either plane. He ought to disengage. He doesn't. The most precarious thing he executes the entire night awaits. The wingman's crew observes it first. The flanker's thermal signature leaps to maximum afterburner, both turbines exceeding military setting. Climb acceleration rising. The Chinese aviator is pitching up forcefully from below and aft, and the EWO registers it instantly. He's climbing vertically, straight midway between the two bombers. He's dedicating himself to the night's decisive maneuver. Nose climbing past 30 degrees, both burners operating, climbing beyond the bomber's altitude range on a vector that'll position him squarely between both airframes. In his reasoning, this represents aggressive yet manageable. One bomber off his 10 o'clock, unobstructed atmosphere to his right, and the getaway descent after he reaches apex. In his reasoning, just one bomber occupies these altitudes. The climb commences. A fighter that stands vertical at maximum burner possesses no favorable alternatives in a rush. He's converting velocity into altitude the way a teenager pedaling up a slope trades momentum. Halfway into the ascent, he's surpassed commitment. Every moment he sustains the climb represents a moment he cannot simply level and leave. Misjudge the apex of a maximum burner vertical, and the fighter hangs suspended, nose upward, with insufficient velocity to sustain flight. The most precarious location in the atmosphere to run out of solutions. The wingman's EWO has been measuring his energy budget since the burner lit, and the calculation aligns with the mathematics. He'll exhaust altitude midway between the two bombers, not beyond them. At 26,000 feet and acceleration continuing, he climbs into the separation. Both bombers maintain level on the initial vector. Both pilot teams maintain slack on the controls. No movement, no adjustment. Two stationary points suspended in the black. And this section demands more courage than any maneuver the flanker executes. The compulsion to move away from a fighter climbing past you sits overwhelming, and acting on it transforms a near miss into catastrophe. Thus, the teams remain motionless and place confidence in the procedure. The flanker surges past 30,000 feet, separating them. 1,000 feet of separation to Saucy 1-1 on his left. 2,000 feet to Saucy 1-2 on his right. The vortex off a fighter, generating 7 Gs in burner, pummels both bombers and flows directly across them. Neither one deflects. Partway through the ascent, the search transmission the EWOs have registered constantly suddenly intensifies. Quicker, steadier, locked into a pattern on the formation. The Type 1493 had remained in low-power search throughout, and now, mid-climb, it steps up the power and changes to track protocol, a sharper, higher-quality examination that comes close to a complete weapons lock. The signal pattern changes the instant it does, and that's the advantage that persists. In the identical 30 seconds, the EWOs have his radar charted in both operating modes. He came to disturb 2 bombers. He's populating their intelligence files instead. At 32,000 feet, he runs out of altitude, pivots rightward to initiate the escape descent from the lead and into what he's convinced himself represents uncontested space. Movement catches his peripheral awareness, motion where his instruments confirmed nothing. He glances. A second B-52, completely illuminated, 8 turbines blazing brilliant in the infrared, fills the rightmost section of his canopy, less than half a mile away. He's a fighter pilot. The scenario reads like muscle memory to him, and the scenario represents an entrapment. He's surrounded by 2 488,000-pound airships, and he began this maneuver moments ago. It's the fighter pilot equivalent of entering a parking position and observing the trucks flanking you are too tight to open your windows, except he's performing it perpendicular at 30,000 feet. The escape descent he organized intersects a bomber he never detected. The direction behind him traverses back through the lead's path he previously entered. Climbing further throws him into the combined rotor of 2 heavies maintaining 525 miles per hour. There's no uncomplicated departure from the predicament he just maneuvered himself into. From Saucy 1-2's compartment, everything unfolds without sound and in infrared. A flanker balanced vertically, a quarter mile off the wing, running out of solutions in real duration. Near enough now that the co-pilot distinguishes the contours of the air-to-air projectiles affixed to the stations, beyond visual range weapons engineered to eliminate the very platform he occupies. So he selects the sole remaining option. He banks forcefully and drives the nose downward, descending across the wingman's track with approximately 600 feet clearance. Both turbines at full power. He descends into the darkness. Both bombers register his vortex. Neither one moves. Transitioning to 18,000 feet inside cloud, his warning receiver goes silent. The B-52s never radiated countermeasures, never shifted course, never relinquished an inch of height. They maintained their assigned vector from beginning to conclusion, while he bound himself into a maneuver that nearly took his life. From his vantage, the interference accomplished nothing, not a trace. From the bomber cockpits, he simply departed with the most extensive passive collection of his existence. He disengages. The bombers persist with their assignment. He flies back with zero awareness of what he abandoned on 2 American recording systems. Personally, I think that's where the authentic drama unfolds, not in the piloting, but in what nobody transmitted.